Well, the good guys or good gals of the Masters of the Universe world had definitely had their fair shake, and it was time to turn to the evil gals. And our first female on the evil side, of course, was going to be none other than Evil Lyn herself. The evil character who has the word evil in her name, because otherwise you wouldn't know she's evil, because you have to have evil in your name to be evil. All right, enough of that. I'm Scott ToyGuru Neitlich. I was the brand manager for Masters of the Universe Classics, and we're jumping into another director's commentary because that's what we do on this channel. All right, so Evil Lyn and getting her into the Masters of the Universe Classics line. Obviously, there were two approaches we could take, and eventually we did take with her, meaning her kind of classic toy yellow and animation whitish, grayish skin. It made sense with classics to do the yellow version first, mainly because that was the toy. And of everything, classics was supposed to be envisioned as an update of the vintage toys, first and foremost. And so that's what we did. So obviously we could do other versions, and we did do other versions. We actually had even more versions of her plan for the long run that we weren't able to get to. But to kick off Evil Lyn's entrance into the MOTU Classics line, it was yellow skin. And no, she did not have jaundice, and no, she was not a member of the Simpsons cast. She had yellow skin in the old line because that popped on shelf. That was a color that was going to be bright and colorful and be noticeable on shelf. When translating her to the animation, the skin tone yellow was toned down a little more than I think Mattel expected, but either way, she still played the same role, Skeletor's kind of number one gal, and often, shall we say, kind of adversary or almost maybe betrayer eventually. But yeah, Evil Lyn was, thrust into the line as to break up the bad guy pantheon and add a little female know-how to the line, colored yellow and blue because that really does pop on shelf, and those are kind of evil colors. And doing other versions of her, like doing her sort of milky white grayish skin tone that she had both in Filmation and 2000X, was not at all off the table. One thing I should add that we never got to in the bios was I wanted to explain that her skin turned yellow when she kind of powered up or used her magic, to at least give a rationale for the yellow skin, other than it popping on shelf. But just never got to that. That would have come out in another Evil Lyn figure that was planned, but we only got to two of them. Alright, so that explanation aside, Evil Lyn's origins in kind of the 80s lines wasn't that deep and mysterious. She started off as another female villain. Her original name was Sultra, which, for, reasons that she was called that. I mean, heck, most females are attractive to look at, let's just say that. Especially, evil female sorceresses can tend to be quite sexy in nature. And her name, the original stab they took at it was Evelyn Powers. She and T.E. Scope and Biff Beastman crash landed from planet Earth. There it is, Evelyn Powers. So yeah, that wasn't just like some crazy thing that I made up that sounded like an 80s name. It really was her original name. Or at least the original explanation of why her name became Evil Lyn, because it was a shortening of her original Earth name of Evelyn Powers. And yeah, we didn't go with that total origin of her being from Earth, along with Beastman and Triclops, because honestly, the idea of calling Beastman Biff Beastman was just like, I can't do that. I'm sorry. We did call Triclops T.E. Scope, but yeah, the idea that the three of them from that original storyline crash landed on Eternia, and then the magics of Eternia transformed them into, the three characters we know and love, or love to hate. We borrowed some elements from it. We did borrow the Evelyn Powers and giving Triclops that as his, the TE sort of scope name. I think I came up with more words for the TE, but yeah, again, Biff Beastman was a bridge too far. That's why we didn't really go with that full story, but just made allusions to it, if you will. So, Evelyn Power's name origin aside, she was pretty much a straightforward figure, especially from a classic standpoint, because like with the vintage line, we were following that template, and she was a new head. She was a new head on the Tila body. We did improve the arm articulation in order to twist the gauntlets more. That was basically just adding another cut, and that was pretty easy to do. But other than that, improving on the gauntlet articulation that some Tila fans had brought up, she was meant to be just a straight up recreation of the vintage toy, reimagined in the classics motif. And again, we were coming right off of 2000X, so a lot of fans wanted, the 2000X version, which we kind of hit later on, but not as much as maybe we should have. Since that one was also a repaint, I know fans kind of wanted like full-on 2000X armor, and that's a story for another time. With the idea that we were going to do a 2000X series in 6-inch eventually. So in classics, the idea was no matter what, she was going to look like, wear that traditional armor, so that we could sell more toys. So eventually we could sell a true 2000X 6-inch figure, which, you can check out the video about that. So going back to, her role, obviously, other than being Skeletor's main squeeze and occasionally a source of some humor for the series, she tended to take on this odd role as the opener of things, or the letter-outer. See, look, I'm making up more words. If you're following along and binging this series, that seems to be becoming a theme now. So, yeah, she was kind of like the Pandora of Masters of the Universe, where she was constantly letting evil creatures out. But this came straight from 2000X and from the notes that Ian Richter had left me for what was going to happen in the 2000X series. So she was going to let Hordak out. You can see the full video in the note here. The whole plan was she was constantly like making up with Skeletor, but then letting out his worst enemy. And hey, that was her thing. What can I say? I didn't make that up. And fans seem to give me a lot of grief as like always having her let things out. Hordak, the Shadow Beasts. But, again, it was not meant to be an idea I was making up. It was straight from 2000X, and I was trying to pick up as much of the 2000X series as possible. I've mentioned before what a huge fan I was of 2000X, and it was definitely very deliberate to work in the notes for where it was going into classics. Alright, so the last thing to kind of mention with Evil Lyn, of course, is the inclusion of Screech, her birdie sidekick, which of course was a repaint of Zor, which had already been tooled for Tila with the Classics line, so it was easy just to redeco and reissue the Eagle tool. Funny thing about Screech is they could never quite figure out how to spell Screech. Even on the package, it's spelled 2 different ways in the vintage line. So, hey, fun with that. And of course, there's also the Filmation version, which again would be for a Filmation series, which did get a little bit of a start, but never quite a finish with the 6-inch line that Mattel did in 2016. Now, the birds in the vintage line and in 2000X were bigger. They were kind of more giant birds, and we went with smaller birds in classics, both because we wanted to do them as pack-ins, and that was kind of how they were represented in the entertainment. They were giant in the vintage line because they came from Big Jim. They were Big Jim's eagle, much like Battle Cat was Big Jim's tiger, or really Tarzan's panther. And that's why, they were gigantic, and it was meant to be like, fantasy animals. But in classics, we made them more in scale with the figures as a true eagle could be, which of course gave us a great eagle tool that could be repainted over and over and over. And now we got to choose just how many E's we wanted to give Screech in her name. Are we having fun yet? I hope so. See you next time.